following is a special presentation of the Sports Journey Network. Sports Journey.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of The Breakdown. I'm your host, Dujunnea Bland, and I am joined, as always, with my co-host Carita Parks. How you doing, Carita?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good, and I'm pretty excited about the action that we've seen over the last couple of weeks, especially in the NFL. But we are in the midst of COVID, and it has reared its ugly head.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the teams that are involved in the team that was really involved here, the Tennessee Titans. They had some cases pop up here. And as always, there can be mishaps with this. Tests aren't foolproof, but they do give us a sense of who has it and who doesn't. And sometimes these tests make false positives or false negatives. Now, it hasn't been proven that it's been a false negative, but it appears that either someone broke the rules or there was a false negative test, which resulted in teammates contracting this coronavirus. What and how do you think this affects the NFL going forward? And is this the beginning of the end?
It's definitely the beginning. I don't know if it's the beginning of the end yet. I believe the NFL was spared in the sense that they're very lucky no one on the Vikings actually caught the coronavirus, because then I think we would definitely have a bigger situation at hand. I mean, Tennessee, this is big enough, but it's one team at this moment. However, I think what it shows us is this can easily happen to other teams. So it's definitely something to watch out for, because with all the positives that have come back, so there were the ones in the beginning of the week, which postponed the game.
Right.
But then more have come out even today, which could potentially impact the Titans' next game. So now there's a lot of rescheduling that's having to go on. Like, okay, rescheduling 1 week, all right. But now you may possibly have to reschedule another week. And how does this play out for Tennessee from a fairness standpoint? If they're able to bounce back and play against the Bills, we're probably in a good place. But then if they can't, what's the next steps? It's a lot, though. It's a lot, I think.
I agree with you. And it's, I've been experiencing this as I've been covering the NHRA, and it's a little bit different. It's drag racing. But the NFL doesn't have the same type of flexibility as the NHRA does. When you start this season, there's no hitting the stop button and the pause button and then kind of rejuggling things and then we're going to replay this thing. It's something that racing has the ability to do. At the beginning, it was supposed to be 16 or 15 straight weeks for them. COVID didn't allow them to go to certain places. They ended up having a track that they could use for several weeks repeatedly. We don't have this ability here. Like you mentioned, I believe they said the Pittsburgh game could be rescheduled for week 7 or week 8. But if they start getting into missing 2 games, how unfair that is. And then, do you believe it is a thing of they should forfeit those games? Or is it unfair to tack those games on at the end of the season, which would in turn, if those teams are involved in playoff implications, does that then make it unfair for those teams who didn't contract it and have to now wait on them?
I don't think waiting on them is going to be a problem for the teams in the playoffs, because for them, it's probably, it kind of gives a sense, maybe an unfair advantage, because you get a little bit more time to rest, because, usually those teams who don't get that bye week, they go straight into playoffs. But if you have to wait, they essentially get a bye week. So I don't know that it would be unfair to the ones who are in the playoffs, because that might work out to their advantage and they come in a little bit fresher than typically.
Right. Now, what do you think is the best form of action here? Now, obviously, I think it's pretty simple. They can work it back in if it's only one game. But if you get to 2 games, what are your feelings on what they should do in that instance? Or is there anything they can do?
I'm sure there's something that they can do, but I'm sure the very last thing they want to do is have to forfeit games. So I'm assuming the NFL is probably going to figure it out, and hopefully they had a plan in place. Like, they had to know something would happen at some point.
Absolutely.
So I'm sure there is a plan in place. I just think it gets a little bit more complicated if you start to get other teams. Like, if another team gets an outbreak, then we start having like a domino effect, and
Yes.
that kind of impacts the NFL as a whole. Like I said, right now, because it's one team, you're probably okay. But the thing is, with the Titans, they were, I believe, 3-0 before this happened.
Yes.
So they were kind of on a roll.
It's a momentum killer.
It's a momentum killer for sure.
It is what it is, but it's a momentum killer for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
And then it's the thought, like you said, if we get more than one team, it's going to be very difficult. You can juggle one, but you get 2 or 3 teams, it's hard to juggle those teams, those schedules. And how are you going to work that back into the NFL schedule to keep the flow so that you can start the playoffs on time? That's a problem, a huge problem. And hopefully, like you said, there's a contingency plan in place that this doesn't affect the season to where this is a domino effect. And we also, like you said, have to be concerned about we don't get a spread between 2 teams, because then it creates a bigger mess of these teams being able to pass this to other teams, which then really hurts the season if you get more than 2.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So, and we're gonna have to see how the rest of this plays out. From my understanding, there was a practice squad player that the Titans just signed, and I believe it sounds like that it originated maybe with that person. But then they also had someone on personnel who tested positive and didn't travel to Minnesota. So I don't know if someone broke the rules or if it was just too late and it had already spread by the time, whoever tested positive was revealed to be positive.
Right. So we can only hope that this is it. Hopefully everyone recovers and get back to playing football and getting back to continuing the role that, especially the Titans, continuing the role that they were on. But I can tell you who is not on a roll, and that is the New York Jets. Under Matt Gase as head coach, it's not good. And
Adam Gase.
I'm sorry. Adam Gase. It's not good in any means. And you look back on his coaching career. In Miami, he started out 10-6, and look, he inherited a team that was already halfway decent from a former head coach. So that don't count. But in his second full year under his full direction, he went 6-10, then 7-9, only to be fired and rehired. Yes, I said rehired by the New York Jets to go 7-9. Now, they had some pieces missing, but he still inherited a team from a man who really, honestly, because of GM circumstances, the history of this football team and not doing the right thing, was unable to do a good job because he didn't have anything to work with. And he still went 7-9 with that football team. So, Adam, that doesn't count. Then now we're looking at an 0-4 football team and a quarterback who you drafted who now looks incompetent. And everybody's blaming him. Who's at fault here, Carita?
I'm going to go with Adam Gase, because if you look at his history as a coach, he was never that great at Miami. Like you said, he inherited a team. And when you inherit a team, you do tend to do pretty well, especially if they're halfway decent.
Right.
But there was a lot of questions about Adam Gase before the Jets even hired him. So I don't really feel bad for how this panned out for them, because it frustrates me, to be honest, when you see these coaches who do not do well, the proof is in the pudding, and then you hire them quickly. The Jets hired him quickly as if he was a hot commodity.
His butt was still on fire.
Right. And for me, and I'm just going to put it out there, Black coaches do not get the same grace.
Say it again.
Black coaches do not get the same grace. So for me, I'm frustrated in that sense, and the Jets should have saw this coming from a mile away.
Exactly. I just spelled out, just by record, what he's all about. And yet, these type of guys continue to be rehired. And the joke's on you, New York. There's no way this guy should even smelled your football team after doing and having a dumpster fire in Miami. You can talk about the ownership all you want in Miami. But the bottom line is, the product on the field, it was sewage. Garbage.
But not only that, like, his attitude, from what I recall, was never that great either.
No, it was trash,
and that
too.
Also translated over to the Jets. It's really hard because he has been Sam Darnold's coach this whole time, so it's really difficult to know if Sam Darnold is a part of the problem, or if it's just he's not in a good situation. We really don't know. I'm going to say he's probably not in a good situation. But
I'm going to use this. I've seen Sam in his first year look very polished, understood where he was going with the football, all of that. This offense doesn't look like it has a clue. Now, granted, as discombobulated as it has looked, they scored 27 points last night to only lose to I don't even know if I call Rippon the second string quarterback. I mean, you lose to a guy who, you should be able to beat defensively. They had several picks and still couldn't get it done. That's a discipline thing. Is that a lack or not a respect for the coach? Because everything that I see here is about motivating guys to be better than what they are. I see a regression in the quarterback, but I see a regression in this whole football team. The only guy who's playing like anybody is Jamison Crowder, because he doesn't need anybody to motivate him.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, this guy's still sitting in the building. And I understand it's early in the season, but you know what? All you got to do is go back to last year and look at the garbage that was put out there on the field. They didn't look at a team that knew what was going on and was collective and put together out there on that football field. It was chaos. And it looks laughable this year, too.
Yeah. We'll see how long he lasts.
It's the New York Jets, so they're probably just going to ride this out, I guess. He may even be back next year. And to go down the road to D.C., the Washington football team. Fan base, they hot.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I get it, but I don't get it. And they're hot at Dwayne Haskins and his performance against a team that I guess people feel that they should have beaten in the Cleveland Browns. 3 interceptions. Can't do that. He looked very, very poor. And it looked like a guy that was trying to do too much, one, and also didn't have a whole lot of help. Now, that does not excuse his mechanics, his footwork, where he failed in those areas, and poor decision-making. Is it too soon to be talking about moving on from Haskins, though, Carita?
I think it's too soon to talk about moving on from Haskins. It called me sympathetic, but I just feel like he's in a tough position. he was in a tough position last year in how they were wavering back and forth on him, and then they just kind of threw him in finally out of the blue. And then this year he comes in, he's the starter, but it's still a difficult situation because, Coach Rivera, while he knows this is a rebuilding year, you still want to put some wins up. And so, there's that pressure of being a new coach and wanting to show some progress. And then it's hard because Dwayne doesn't really have a lot of offensive weapons around him. But to your point, you also cannot turn the ball over 3 times in a game. Exactly. That's not helping your case either. Take care of the ball at the very least. So the mounting criticism and the frustration of the fan base, because, it doesn't make sense, but fans want instant gratification. They should know that they weren't going to get that this year. I think that first win made fans just go crazy and think it was about to be a 10 and whatever season, So I think it kind of built up their expectations. And then, the fans are tired of losing as it is. So it's just a hard place to be in as a quarterback. But I think they need to let him play this season out because the fact of the matter is you weren't going to the playoffs this season anyway. No. So just see if he improves. Now, if he doesn't seem to be improved, then we have a different conversation.
Right. And I'm going to throw this out there. I tweeted it, and people want to act like they don't want to have the real conversation. The bottom line is the man had 9 starts coming into this season and coming into, I believe, after that last game. Okay? You got 3 head coaches, 2 systems. You have COVID, and I'm not using that as an excuse, but he had no offseason to learn an entirely new offense. And yet we have a offense that is entirely new on its own. Just about everybody other than McLaurin is new. The offensive line, a lot of new moving parts, especially with the injuries. So you want to talk about cohesion, he needs it from everyone. Now, to Dwayne, you can't make it's not the interceptions, it's how they looked.
Yeah.
Logan Thomas over the middle. Okay, I don't know whether you didn't see the safety coming down or not, but it's quite obvious the safety was like beelining, looking at your tight end. Now, if you thought that you were going to throw a ball in there and force it in there and have your tight end to make a play, okay, that's still risky though. And in that point of the game, that's a no-no. Now, you staring down receivers, that's a no-no. The mechanics and his throwing suffered. Footwork suffered. You have to pay attention to details. And he even said it as much, speaking to the press. He realizes that he needs to do better. Great article by our guy at Sports Journey, Bob Matthews, who wrote this article talking about Dwayne Haskins. And Dwayne, in this quote, and I'm just going to paraphrase it a little bit. You guys can go read this article at sportsjourney.com. But he talked about him having the 24-hour rule, looking at the things that he did well and he didn't do well, and he needs to get better. He said he just realizes that I have to be better and focused on the details, that we have to do better and the details on what we did well. And that's clear. But now, I'll ask you this. If he goes out and puts out another performance that looks like that, is he done for the year? Do you pull him?
I still don't think you pull him, but he's going to really hurt himself if he doesn't show improvement in this next game. And you made a really good point because his interceptions were all his fault, right? You know, sometimes quarterbacks throw interceptions and it like hits a guy's hand or someone makes a poor like play on the ball and someone gets it. But right, like this time, like all those interceptions were based on very poor decisions by him. And this week's going to be a huge test because you got Lamar Jackson, and if the Ravens run that score up, which they do a lot of times, if they run the score up, he's going to be feeling that pressure again to try to make things happen. And that's the hard part, because I understand the reasoning behind getting rid of Adrian Peterson, but let's be honest. They need an Adrian Peterson right now, because at least he could move the ball.
Absolutely.
And that would take some pressure off Dwayne. But right now, no one's moving the ball. Dwayne's not moving the ball. The running backs aren't moving the ball. Like, there's been some good catches by receivers and some decent yardage, but it just hasn't been enough so far.
Right.
So the offense as a whole is struggling, and I think that's why I'm being a little bit more lenient on Dwayne. If the offense was doing their thing and then Dwayne was the problem, we got another issue. But the entire offense is struggling. It's just easier to blame the quarterback, and you give them reason to blame you when you turn the ball over 3 times.
Darn right. Now I'm going to allow you to close this out before we go to the break. And I'm going to ask you this. Me and Lake spoke earlier this week, and as far as Dwayne, fans are also upset because he was on social media doing a whole lot of talking. Now, you claim with all these emojis that you on quiet time, that you're going to be quiet, right? Then stay off the social media. What do you think as far as that is concerned? And I'm going to let you close this out before we go to break.
Well, you know how I feel about social media, just from a PR perspective. You need to stay off of social media. Keep your mouth shut. Like, there's no need for you to say anything, to be honest. I mean, you could be on social media and be on there doing other things. But when it comes to, especially after a week that you just had, like, no, you got to be quiet and chill. You know what I mean? Just chill. Be in that playbook. Do what you got to do in practice. We don't need to know. It's about action at this point. Show us the change. Don't tell us. Don't send us emojis. And I mean, also, this kind of goes to the social media in the off season, which I didn't have a problem with.
Right.
But that's why I was like, okay, he's been putting in the work. So that part's true. But I was still like, until he gets on that field, we don't know for sure. And so far, it hasn't been great, admittedly. And, not only with having very small starts in the NFL, but coming from college, too. He didn't have a lot of starts in college. So, I mean, he's still really learning. And I think the problem with Dwayne is not that he won't potentially be talented in this league. I just feel like the patience people are going to have for him learning is going to be very short.
And I think you're 100% right with that. You got to change it. You heard Carita. Come on, Dwayne. Let's get with it. It's your future, and a lot of people believe in you, but
that's what I was going to say. I'm pulling for him. That's what I was going to say. I'm pulling for him. I have defended him since he's been quarterback. So prove me right, Dwayne.
And with that, we are going to go to break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the Falcons and those collapses. Yikes. And we are back. An Atlanta Falcons fan wishing they could go back and hit the reset button on this season. Maybe even hit the reset button on this coach and Dan Quinn. I'm going to tell you right now, I do not know, and I put this on social media, I do not know how does Dan Quinn still have his job in Atlanta after 2, not 1, but 2 in one season, epic, colossal collapses in football games. this ain't his first time. But man, how much more, and how many more is this organization going to put up with before they send him up the road?
Not much. And I'll tell you why, because obviously they blew that New England lead that they had during Super Bowl. That was their Super Bowl.
But that was Kyle Shanahan's fault, though.
That's what I was getting to. Now Kyle Shanahan is not there. And we're seeing the same issues, blowing leads. Matt Ryan, he's having some difficulties. So now we're seeing that, okay, it's not a Kyle Shanahan thing. I mean, he played a part in that, but now he's gone. And we're seeing the same issues. So now it's like, okay, this is definitely a coaching problem.
Too much talent over there to be doing this nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
You go and get another epic running back in Todd Gurley. You have weapons all over the wide receiver core. Tight end is definitely doable and can work. He does a decent job and can get it done. Your defense should be fine. And yet, this team seems to be undisciplined and can't finish a game to save its life. That only goes to 1 point and 1 point only, the head coach. Now, Steve Wilks got 1 year in Arizona, and they sent his behind packing. 1 year. Yet, this man been here since 2013. You've been to a Super Bowl where you completely just fell off. The wheels fell off. The whole thing fell apart. And then you do it in a season when, honestly, you should be contending for the NFC South. Easy. And you're dropping games.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen enough out of Dan Quinn.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think it's time. It really, to be honest with you, he'd have been packing his bags and been out of the locker room. He wouldn't have made it back. There's no doubt about that. After that game that they put up, I mean, one time I get it. It happens. Shouldn't happen that often, but it happens. And then you do it again. Nah. And the team just doesn't look very motivated at the end of games. And that comes down to coaching. Period.
Yeah. Eventually, you just have to make that move and make that decision because, like you said, there was definitely a lot of blame on Kyle Shanahan after that first Super Bowl. But now we've had plenty of opportunity to see the team without Shanahan. And so, yeah, you just definitely have to look at Dan Quinn at this point. And you don't want to waste all these years and all this talent on the wrong coach. Because then you'll be starting all over.
And how many times has this organization had talent and can't seem to get over the hump when necessary? They've wasted countless talent here.
If I was a Falcons fan, I would still be extremely bitter over that Super Bowl that they lost because, like I said, that was their Super Bowl to win. They were in complete control. That should have never happened. And I know Tom Brady is Tom Brady, but if you would have kept your foot on the gas, there was no way.
There was no way at all. They owned them on both sides of the ball, including special teams. They had no answers. But you never
get that back. Like you don't get that time back. Getting to the Super Bowl is so hard. And we've seen it. They haven't been close since, really.
Right. I mean, since then, what was it? It's a guy named Chandler was the quarterback. Since they had been before with Jamal Anderson and the whole Dirty Bird. So they already know how long it takes to get there. Yeah. And then you go and completely just lay a dud. And then you keep the guy, and I get it. Okay, so he give an opportunity, but he goes. I mean, it's 7-9, 7-9 in 2018, 7-9 in 2019, and we're at 0-3 right now. So why are you still here? Because don't tell me you didn't have talent. You had talent. You got plenty of talent. He's had it since he's been here. Now, don't get me wrong. There's been some situations with the defense, but if you don't put your defense in peculiar situations when you know that you have some weaknesses, you don't have this problem. Again, falls and comes down to coaching. So again, I ask, why is he still here? Because I'm telling you, if it's anybody else,
Falcons or ownership to figure out. Either you make a tough decision, or you don't.
And they're going to have to make some decisions here soon, as they will be taking on the Green Bay Packers. Loss. Unfortunate set of circumstances for them. Just like Washington, unfortunate set of circumstances there. They're taking on Baltimore. That's going to be tough. So
yeah, now it's going to be a tough game anyway. So it's just even tougher now when the spotlight's on you.
Absolutely. And with that, we're going to go to another quick break. And let me tell you, when we come back, the NBA, and we're speaking about coaches being fired. I'm sorry, Carita. I just don't agree with this firing that happened in the NBA. But we'll talk about it when we come back. And so it was. Doc Rivers, after blowing a awesome lead, and it was embarrassing, but he gets fired. And I'm going to be the first to tell you that I don't agree. And this is why. You have a team laden with stars. And it seems like, especially your big two or big three, always seem to be MIA when it mattered. So is that coaching? Maybe a little bit. But those guys get paid to be playing and being there in those big moments to close out games. The series should have been over. But because and this is something we saw in the bubble. This is what they have been doing. This is something they've been doing all season. You play well and you play phenomenally well, scary well. Many people thought they were going to overtake the Lakers. And then you put out performances like that. And it doesn't happen once. It happens in succession. Now I understand Doc has had his struggles of getting out of big playoff games. In big playoff moments. I understand. But it's 1 year trying to assemble this team with the circumstances. He should have been given another year. Carita, what do you, especially you covering the NBA as much as you do, what do you think about this firing? And was it warranted?
I think the frustration was definitely warranted, blowing the 3-1 lead. I mean, we just talked about this on the NFL side. I think the frustration was warranted, but I do think that he should have gotten at least one more year. One more year. Because, they just got Kawhi.
Right.
So there's some adjustments. Yes, they're a team that was built to win, and they should have never blown a 3-1 lead. But I just don't know if I feel like it was enough to get rid of him so quickly. I can't remember off the top of my head how many seasons Doc has been with the Clippers, but it just doesn't seem like enough to where you just fired him so quickly.
Right.
Like, give him one more year and see what he could do in that time. But as I said earlier, some people don't get as much grace.
You're right. They don't. It really isn't fair. Um, and I really don't feel that he himself was fair. And I'm trying to. Here we go. So Doc was with the Clippers for one season. One.
What?
One.
Why did I think it was longer than that?
And and wait a minute here. Huh? No, it's showing him as a point guard. I
What?
was looking up his stats here, and I'm gonna have to get back on that one. But either way, I don't care. I think it was several seasons. But again, he didn't have a whole lot of tools. He's
Right.
just having the tools to really push this team over the top. They were missing some key pieces,
Uh,
rebounders, and things like that.
well, I might have to change how I feel.
Uh oh.
He's been with the Clippers since 2013.
Ouch. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't think it was that long, but I knew it was more than a season, so I take it back.
I'm not gonna take mine back though.
To prove himself.
But do you think he had the pieces to prove himself?
No, and
See,
that
that's my thing. I
does
understand he's been there a long time, but again, the Clippers have been the armpit of the NBA for a long time, even when they had Doc Rivers. Now you're just going to go and get him two major stars, real stars. Now, granted, I'm not a huge Paul George fan. I think he goes missing more than he's active, but they still should have been able to get it done. So,
right.
with that being said, I understand that there's some things that can be put on him. There's some situational things. And see, my mom thought he should have been fired too. So she said that. She said that after it was a 3-2 game.
Mm.
So I get it, but those players, especially those stars, did not show up in big moments when they needed to. Sure, they showed up a couple times against the Lakers, but they didn't show up, especially when they needed to in the playoffs.
And that's why you bring in a Kawhi, right? But even when the Raptors got Kawhi, it took a little bit. You know what I
It
mean? It took
did.
some time.
Right.
So he just got Kawhi as a new weapon. So yeah, I think that they could have at least given him one more year, because what was that really gonna make a difference? Because now you're bringing in a new coach, and that's another different layer. So you
Right.
still have another adjustment that has to be made. And if this coach miraculously turns the Clippers around and they win a championship, that will be so unfair to Doc Rivers, because this is essentially his team.
Yep. Now, who's the next Clippers coach?
I don't know.
I'm gonna go with Ty Lue. I've heard Sam Cassell. I don't think he's the right guy for that job, but Ty Lue got a championship. I know y'all can say what he want. Y'all can say what y'all want about old Lulu, but Ty Lue got a championship. I
Well,
think it
he's
could be
got a
Ty
lot of
Lue.
options, though. They said this just came out today, I believe, that
Breaking.
he is meeting with the Pelicans today, the Clippers on Saturday, and the Rockets on Sunday.
Hey,
So
if
he
I
has
was him, I'd go to the
options.
Pelicans.
That's why I'm just like, I don't know. He's going to be someone's head coach,
Right.
but he has an opportunity to weigh his options.
Exactly. And so did Doc Rivers very quickly was rehired. It's funny how the NBA works in that regard.
Right.
Doc Rivers quickly rehired by the 76ers. I'm going to take it from the point that I felt he should have sat out a year. Now, I
Why is
don't
that?
know. Maybe that's not a good idea, but I think he should have sat out a year before taking the job. Either way, he's the 76ers' new head coach. What do you feel about this job, and how does Doc Rivers fit with really a talented squad that they have over there that with the 76ers?
Well, that's what I was gonna say. They are a talented squad, and I do like the hiring. I think that they will respect Doc for what he brings to the table, and sometimes that is helpful. I mean, I think he can get you to a championship.
Right.
But it's still, the onus is still on the players too.
Absolutely.
But I do like the hiring, and I think it can work.
Now, could Doc? This is my last question on this. Could Doc Rivers be considered the NBA's Marty Schottenheimer? You know what I mean by that, right? Marty was always known for, if you want a guy to come in and write your organization and get them consistent, Marty can do that. But he ain't the guy to take you to the promised land. Are we overstating Doc's abilities, and maybe he is a guy who can stabilize your organization, but not the guy to get you over the top?
I think time will tell. Like we just said, he didn't have all the pieces when he was with the Clippers, and then he kind of recently just got them, and then he was fired.
Right.
So I think time will tell if he's not, because to your point, the 76ers are a talented team, and that's been the frustration for the most part, is because they are talented and they haven't lived up to their talent. Now, if he can't take this talented team to the promised land, then we might be having to revisit this.
Agreed.
But I'm not yet willing to put him in that category.
I totally understand. That makes a lot of sense. And with that, we're going to close the show. It's been awesome. Great things going on in sports. And, man, it's been busy, hasn't it, Carita?
Yeah, it has. It really has. All these sports happening at the same time. Although I'm glad sports is back, it's a lot to keep up with.
It is so much going on, so much information. And tell them where they can find the information that you put out, Carita.
Well, you can find my general sports commentary on my website, Double Take Sports. That's dbltakesports.com, at dbltakesports on social media. You can find my Mystics and Wizards commentary on sportsjourney.com, and my Washington football team work on the 3pointconversion.com.
And you must go check that out. It's great stuff. It's different from anything else you're going to find out there. You gotta go read the stuff, all right? Make sure you do it. I'm counting on you. You can find my stuff at sportsjourney.com, covering the Saints. We touch on some other little topics as well. Obviously, you can find a lot of this content right here on the show, and we appreciate you listening to us on the show. And you can follow me at NotBland21. I love chopping it up with you guys. It's always fun. It's been a great season, and it's been fun to talk with you guys so far this season, and I look forward to continuing that conversation. With that, you guys have an excellent weekend, and we'll be back next week right here on The Breakdown.